But as a child, I think I didn't look at most of the things that way, that it's tough, because I didn't know anything else. I thought that is how life was supposed to be, you know. But it was tough. It was tough, and also coming from a big family, resources are scarce. It's just not easy. But somehow you find happiness and you live life because that's what you know. Yeah.
You made a very good point that makes me think about my own life too, that as a young child, and I think this is like 90% of the kids back in Uganda, that we don't know what we need. We don't know what we don't have, because that's life for us. We grew up not sometimes missing a meal, and that's normal to us. Mujevale, Mujevale, Mujevale. My name is Bani Kibuka, and welcome to another episode of the Ugandan Ball Talk Show. Yeah, thanks for making this happen. Thanks for coming on my podcast.
Thank you too for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I know it's been a long time. I think you reached out to me a few months ago.
Yes.
That you wanted to be on a podcast, and I make this open for everybody, no matter what you do, no matter what the level you're on. My podcast is not for some people, and other people I make it open to everybody, whether you're famous, whether you're not famous, whether you're rich, whether you're poor. All I care about is sharing stories and people to get to hear your stories too.
Oh, that's nice. I'm happy to hear that it's inclusive.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to be here.
Oh, do you mind starting with sharing your name with our listeners today and who you are?
Oh, my name is Nalumansi Gertrude Katula Veronica. I'm commonly known as Gertrude Katula. I just use those two names in most places. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I have so many names, it's like a sentence. So I just choose two.
That's fun. What if you don't mind, you mind telling us a lot of names that you have?
It's a long story. Well, I grew up as Nalumansi Gertrude. Okay. Then when I got married, I added the Katula name. Then when they were registering for national IDs, when I went to register, those guys were like, you can add any name that you have, all your names. So I knew that my mom had given me the name Veronica and had never used it.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, let me write all my names. And this is one way to honor my mother. Let me just have all my names there. So when they brought my national ID, it had all the names.
Oh, wow.
I thought they would choose like the first two or three, but it had all the names.
That is pretty crazy. Because I have a kind of similar story, but it's not as similar as yours. In the way that when I was registering for my P7, my parents had given me a name that I didn't like. So I told them to change the name, but they didn't. And when I was registering for P7, I took out one name because I had three names. So I took out one name that I didn't like, and then I just kept two. So that's why I used Bonnie Chibuka, but I had three names like most people. But it's funny to compare things that way, because like now when I live in the United States, it's not easy to change your name or even add a name on that. So we tell them these stories and they find it pretty funny, because even my elder brother, he didn't take our family name, the Chibuka, because my dad is Chibuka, I'm Chibuka. But for him, he uses Nsubuga, which Nsubuga can be a brother to Chibuka because they're the same clan, So, which most people in America, they don't really understand. It's quite...
It's complex.
Yeah. So what do you do, Gertrude?
Well, I'm a teacher. I'm a Montessori teacher by profession.
Okay.
And I taught. I've been teaching for some time, like over 10 years, really.
Yeah.
I started teaching. It was like by accident, I should say. I was I was admitted in Makerere University in the vet faculty, something to do with animal husbandry. And I couldn't continue because I didn't have tuition. So I had to drop out like the first semester. So when I dropped out, I met someone who told me that, of course, I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. It was just crazy because when my classmates were like, "Oh, what are you doing? Where are you? What?" So I had to keep away from people for some time. Yeah. And I met someone who told me, he was actually my dad's friend. He had lived in the UK and then returned to Uganda. He told me that you could just go and find experience because sometimes it counts more than the qualifications, and the qualifications can come after. So because in my senior 4, I had helped in the first Montessori school in Uganda, I went to work there in that short holiday. I kind of had an idea that, oh, that's some kind of work someone can do. So I was living near Heritage International School, and I went there and met the head of school, and I introduced myself and I told him I love children. Is it okay if I volunteer? So he was really agreeable, and he's like, come back on Monday. And
wow.
That's how I started the journey of
And the rest
teaching.
is history.
Yes. Yeah. And then afterwards, I managed to do a Montessori course online. It was from India, but it had a condition that you had to be in a school environment. So I went to the principal, they wrote me something to confirm that I'm in a school. And so I enrolled and got a diploma. And I kept on working, but in my head, at the back of my head, I kept on wondering why I suffered with math, why I did chemistry and biology. And dealing with young children is so challenging. You feel like you're not applying all these things. It was so hard for me to accept it.
Yeah.
Though it was.
Now I was gonna say we're gonna dig into that a little bit later. I'm gonna ask you actually specific questions on your experience and your time as a teacher and all that. But for my listeners, usually I like to kind of follow your background a little bit, and it's my bad on my side because I brought in this question before I asked you about all that, because I want to see how your background was like before you went into like what you're doing right now. But so where, I don't know if I've already asked you, where were you born, like where you grew up?
Oh, I grew up, my primary school was in Mukono, and then high school I was I was in Kampala in Bukasa. Yes.
That's the school, the high school you went to in Bukasa?
Oh, no, I was studying in Makerere College School. For my year, and then I went to Seroma Christian High School.
Yeah, I think I'm familiar with most of those schools, Seroma, Makerere. How about primary?
Oh, primary, I went to, it's called Bishop's West Primary School in Mukono.
I wouldn't say I know it, but I think, yeah, I think I'm part of it. Now,
it's near UCU.
Yeah, UCU. Yeah, I think I know where UCU is at. Growing up, do you have siblings? Did you grow up in a big family, a small family?
Oh. I grew up in a very big family. We are 16. We are 16 children.
16?
Yes, with different mothers. Though,
okay, 16. Yeah. and what's your position in the 16?
Let me see. Okay, with my mom, I'm the firstborn. With my dad, I'm like the sixth-born. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I think most of my guests that I bring on the podcast, they're all from big families, and like that's how we are, because most of the people in Uganda, and I'm not from a big family, but when you add my cousins and all that, we're really like big, and we're a lot of people. But just my dad only had 2 boys, but when you add like my cousins and everybody, it's a pretty big family. So yeah, so I just asked that to just get familiar with where you grew up and how life was like growing up. What was life like for you growing up in Mukono as a young child?
It it was tough. But as a child, I think I didn't look at most of the things that way, that it's tough, because I didn't know anything else. I thought that is how life was supposed to be, you know. But it was tough. It was tough, and also coming from a big family, resources are scarce. It's just not easy. But somehow you find happiness and you live life because that's what you know. Yeah.
You made a very good point that makes me think about my own life too, that as a young child, and I think this is like 90% of the kids back in Uganda, that we don't know what we need. We don't know what we don't have, you know, because that's life for us. We grew up not sometimes missing a meal, and that's normal to us unless somebody else tells you like, oh, that's not normal. But as kids, we growing up, we didn't know that we need this and this and this. It's just now that when you grow up and think about, oh my gosh, we was only to so some people don't even eat breakfast. You're like, oh, we didn't even eat breakfast. We didn't know people eat breakfast, but you were happy with what you have because you didn't know. Yeah, that's a very good point and to think about. And those are some of the things I like my listeners to hear from, because I have a lot of listeners from the US, to know how life was like for kids growing up, and even the kids that are growing up in Uganda at this point, that I think life was different for the other kids that grew up a while ago. Like kids who are growing up in this generation might not go through the same things we went through, or the things that we went through might not be the same things that our elders went through. So when they listen to this podcast, they will hear what you have to say, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm thankful for what I have because there's other people who did really have a lot. So I'm glad you shared that. For the question I asked you earlier before I went into your background, that's where I wanted to put my focus on, because that's where areas of expertise, and that's where you've like studied a lot. I've seen your Instagram putting a lot of effort in teaching and helping the kids and educating. And when I was writing a description of my podcast, I said we talk about education, entertainment, God, anything. It's a lifestyle. And I'm glad that I have someone from like you, the areas of education, that we can sit down and talk about like education.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you ended up in teaching by accident. But I wanted to ask you, when you were in high school, what was the dream you want? What was something you wanted to do? Or did you even have any thoughts of education in your head?
I'm always aiming for the best. So in high school, I always wanted to be a doctor. If not a doctor, an engineer. That is what I wanted to be. Yeah. But I didn't have a clear picture of how to get there, what it requires and everything. But I felt like those were the best jobs I can get, or the best things I can be. And I knew that I had to do sciences to get there. And good enough, I was good at sciences, despite the fact that I would miss school a lot. There's even a class where I studied like one term. Wow. And then I went and did an interview for the following year, and I got above 50s, and we're like, she can go to the next class. But I missed most of the school. So, but I wanted to be that. I never saw myself as a teacher, and it's something I've never, ever thought about. Like I had never thought about that. It just happened to me. I just landed into it somehow.
Well, that is crazy. And for the last 2 episodes I've done with different people I've hosted on the podcast, they went to school, they did sciences, and they thought of being, like they also mentioned the same thing you just said, like when we grow up, you think the careers that you want, doctor, engineer, because you're going to make a lot of money because of the life you grew up with. You know what? I'm going to study hard, get a good job, be a doctor, and make a lot of money and help my family, and we build a house, because that's how you see yourself. But when you grow up, you start seeing life changing, like not the way you think in your head, but like it just changes. Because those 2 people I hosted in the last episode, they're now content creators on YouTube and they're making a lot of money, but they never thought about that when they were growing up, because there's not even a combination in high school that you can do to be a YouTuber.
No.
But to listen to your story, how you also never, I mean, being a teacher is a career, which is a good thing, but like you had plans, and then I'm a Christian, and there's a scripture I like in Proverbs 16 verse 9 that says we make plans, but the Lord determines our steps. You know, like you have your plan in the head, but God takes you to this direction.
He had a different plan. Earlier on, I because of the situations you go through, so God is always your refuge. You know, you have to run to God. You have to depend on God. Otherwise, there are certain things you can't go through unless you have hope. You have a source of hope, you know. So I used to be in fellowships at school, fellowships at church, and everywhere. So one time, I was in a youth fellowship, and some guy was praying and told me that, you know what, Gertrude, God has called you to teach. But I left all those words with him. Like in my head, they didn't click. I kept on pursuing, wanting to be a doctor. I tried to apply in medical school. I tried everything. I tried scholarships. I tried everything. And all those things failed. The only things that worked are the ones that are in the line with education.
And that's how most things work. I think it's the same way my life has worked. And like, I mean, today is not me to share my story. I shared my story on the podcast. So if everybody's wondering what I'm talking about, I shared my story and my journey and how I ended up where I'm at today. And if somebody goes back and listen to it, they'll find out that it's similar to what you're exactly talking about. So I'm gonna switch my focus to now. Even though you ended up in teaching on accident, you are a passionate teacher. You call yourself a passionate teacher. What makes you call your passionate teacher, and how did things change when you ended up being a teacher to now becoming a passionate person who was there by accident?
So when I started my teaching career with high-end children. Heritage International School is a very, very expensive school. They're expatriate kids and very rich kids, like ministers and all that.
Where did you say that school is?
It's in Kansanga. In Uganda, Kampala, Kansanga.
Okay.
When were you last in Uganda?
I was there last year, actually.
Okay. Anyways, so it's in Kansanga. It's an American school. Teaching there helped me to understand. Of course, at the beginning, I had no idea. I came as a volunteer, but I love knowledge. For some reason, I knew that, yes, having this poor background, one thing that had to bring me forward to make me a better person was to learn as much as possible. So I always had this strong thirst for knowledge, to learn. I would go to the library. The class I was teaching would stop at midday, but I wouldn't leave at midday. I would go to the library, read about the curriculum. I don't understand, like, I don't know, what are they teaching? What is it all about? Why are they teaching this? I've always had that inquisitive mind. I always want to find out stuff. So I was there for several years. I left and then I came back, and then I went to another school called Kampala Community International Preschool. It's owned by an American. And in 2017, I just stopped teaching. There were so many other things that were happening that were bothering me, and I had to stop teaching. Then after that, I started going into local schools, trying to compare what children learn in local schools. How does it look like? How does it compare to international schools? And the difference was so huge. And you check on the market, look for early childhood materials on the market. You find things which are missing gaps. They are not concrete. That kind of thing. So I'm like, well, a child is a child, whether you're white, whether you're born by a Black person, you're born by a white person, whether you're born in the village or born in the city, you are a child and you deserve to have a right to the tools that will help you to succeed in life. So it doesn't matter whether someone is going to a school where they're paying thousands of dollars, or a child who's going to a school where they're paying 100,000 or 50,000 shillings.
Like UPE.
You know, like UPE. I think every child should have the tools. Give them the tools, you know, give them the tools, and then life will tell what they become, but they have the tools. And the thing is, these tools are there and they can be provided for children. So I felt that it's my mandate now. God has helped me to be exposed to all these things, to see the gaps which are here and to be able to fill them. So that's how I started going into designing and publishing learning materials, and trying to, I've been talking to different people, trying to make sure that these things are available for children to have the tools.
Are you still teaching, or you're just doing the materials that you're talking about?
Right now, I'm just doing materials, and I'm trying to promote them, especially in reading. You see, the other day I read in the monitor, the daily monitor, they were saying 60% of children are not able to read from P3 up to P7, or when they read things, they don't understand them. And you know, the reason is simple. They are not given the tools when they're supposed to have the tools. And as they keep going upwards, they're getting a lot of content, which overloads them. And yet they still didn't get the foundation. So for me, that is what pushes me. So that is my passion, to provide tools to these children and to be able to use them to, you know, to improve their outcomes.
That's a good explanation you gave right there. And you hit everything. You answered all the questions I was gonna ask you with. But one of the things you just mentioned that took me back to my own education, because I went to school in Uganda from primary throughout senior 6. But we also struggled with reading, like the materials, and our library we had a library, but it didn't have books, you know, for us to read. And it's just, should I call it just a decoration? Like, you know, like you have a library or something, but we lack the materials. And that area of reading is really crucial, because right now I'm sponsoring one of my little cousins who has had troubles with education, and his mom passed away with cancer, and he has struggled just to find school, and he's growing, but he's still I think a class behind or something according to his age. And you could see the struggle he had to catch up, to learn these things. And I had to hire a tutor, like somebody to just, during the pandemic, somebody to just come and just teach him while to catch up, so he can go and take an interview to go to P1. And that teacher has done a great job. The lady that was helping this kid learn through the pandemic, they did a good job, because now the kid did the interview, and now he's in school studying. But that's a big problem that we have, that kids will grow up and they don't know how to read. And I'm glad that you came out to notice that. But when I was coming to the US to study here, you had to do a TOEFL test, the English test, and you have to do sections: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. My reading was terrible because of the background that I had. Like, I couldn't read for anything, like the composition, like read those paragraphs and then answer questions, you know, like it's a struggle that I know a lot of other kids in Uganda struggle with that. Did you have anything you wanted to add on something?
And you know, leaving alone the foundation, that learning all the phonics, the sight words, how to blend and how to segment words and all that, that's the foundation. That's the foundation, like lower primary and nursery. And when you go through the curriculum for Uganda, I've taken time to like understand the curriculum, because I took time to understand Montessori, to understand Alia's foundation stages. I worked with the core standards for early childhood for California because I worked with a school that uses that. So I had to understand it as well. So I got the curriculum for primary in Uganda from P1 up to P7.
Okay.
I'm studying it because I hope to also produce material that is actually focusing on the curriculum, because the curriculum is designed by professionals who understand what should be done. But the implementation, people do not implement it accordingly. They implement what they think will be examined so they can get 4s and everything. But composition is there. It's actually encouraged from P1 up to P7 in almost every topic that they do, but they just don't do it. So, and in our country, yes, they're doing a lot of work, I would presume. I'm not sure, but I believe they're doing a lot of work. But following up on the curriculum,
a lot of work in what? In education?
I think so. I don't have to say that they're not.
I won't say anything. I'll leave it at that too, because I read some things a while ago about education in Uganda, but for safety purposes, we'll leave it at that.
We leave it at that. So, but following up and ensuring that, yes, we designed this thing, are people really doing it? Like that kind of monitoring and, evaluating if what you planned is actually being implemented. And if it's not, people need more training. Do they need more awareness? Do they need like that kind of heart into what, if you really want to educate people, I think needs to be encouraged, or it needs to be fired up a little bit. Yes. And that in Uganda, we don't have a reading curriculum. As important as it is, it is like the backbone of reading. It, the heartbeat of learning, but we don't have a curriculum. So people will pick things from here and there and bring it. And then, somehow magically people read or they don't, but there is no structure, like from the ministry. This is the structure. It is not there.
Yeah, that's really sad. And you think about all the kids that are growing up now, but that's in a way to appreciate people like you that notices these things and try to take action on them. And I really appreciate you for that. And there's a quote you shared on your Instagram at one time that says, if you want to raise barrier breakers, teach them to read Oris. What does that speak out to you?
You see, there's a lot is hidden in books. A lot of information is hidden.
That's true.
And so many people, we've signed contracts that are binding you, but because you didn't take time to read and understand it, or you looked at the document and you're like, let me see where the money is. That happens a lot in Uganda. Let me see where the money is. Where do I sign? But all these things in there are binding you and they are against you, but you've not read to understand because you fear to read. And there's a lot of material out there on every subject, even parenting, which people are struggling so much with, like so many things. But we don't read, But if you read, you find out so much and you can deliver yourself. You can, rise up and change a lot of things just by the information that you find, because people have found information and put it in books. But you have to read it first.
That is true. That is true. Like reading expands your knowledge and gives you, like, you see all the intelligent people, you'll see them like they will speak or quote things from this book and reference these things. And like, even, I don't know, just like reading helps you to get a better understanding about life, like just normal things. And so that's, I think I agree with you a lot on that. Like just reading will expand. So I also saw something about the virtual study. Was it virtual studying on your Instagram?
Yeah, there was a time I was doing a virtual school that was during the lockdown.
Yeah, I was assuming it was in a lockdown. So that's why I was gonna ask you how you came up with that.
So during the lockdown, parents would call me and ask me, like, what can we do? Children at home, they're not learning. And then they're like, schools are sending hard copy materials, which we don't understand. We don't know what to do. We are really not doing anything. So I came up with virtual school, and I would record lessons for children. I would record a morning circle, record a reading lesson, literacy lesson, and math lesson, and share them with the parents, and also send them materials showing them, like, after this lesson you do this, after this lesson you do that. And it was impressive because I got very good feedback from the parents. And they're like, now you're making it clear. Now we understand it. Now we can also follow along. Why? Because I don't believe in skipping steps. I must understand it myself and know that step 1 goes to step 2 and step 3, so that anyone else who is there can also follow along. So yeah, that's how that happened.
That's really good, because when the pandemic happened, obviously I was in the United States and my mind couldn't stop thinking about the kids back in Uganda, especially from my own cousin that I was telling you about, that I'd sat home for a long time. And then the pandemic happened, to stay home for 2 years without going to school. Like, you think about them, and like in the US, you see their system, they have a virtual school, like kids will stay at home and they meet their teachers on the computer and they still continue with life. But poor kids in Uganda, like, you just stay home for 2 years and 2 years are gone, and just wasted those years. But
I know. And even if you're to do, some schools try doing Zoom lessons and everything, but you're doing a Zoom lesson and half the kids are gone because of network. And then some come back, some don't come back. Then others come back, then others go, like that. So you end up having a lesson that is not effective at all.
Right.
Yeah. So it was quite difficult for parents and for everyone. But that's how I tried to help. I tried to help the few that I was able to help, and I was really happy about it. So when schools opened, as you know, parents don't like to have children at home. They kept on asking me, recommend a school, recommend a school. They need to go to school. So yeah, they had to go to physical school.
So back in April, you sent me an email about you were running. Oh yeah, that's when you sent me the email for this virtual school. I had a lot going on in that time too, and we never got an opportunity to actually put it out there for the listeners. But I'm glad you shared about it. Are you still trying to push? Because I know it will be useful at some point. Like, it will be useful if a kid falls sick, they can't come to school, and they can have to stay at home in any case, like any emergency. Because I know virtual school will come in handy at some point. Is it something you're still working towards, or what's the goal with that?
It's something I hope to maintain in the future. However, I'd like to have a physical school where kids come. Reason being, in a virtual school, kids they miss out on a physical, like physical presence of teachers and other children, because children learn a lot from their environment, and you can't dictate the environment at home. So physical school can be just for emergency, or when there are factors, that are failing the child from coming to meet other kids. But other than that, I think they should be in a good environment. Being a Montessori teacher, and the environment is very important in the child's learning. Like, it's a third teacher. That one is based on ratio. I don't know if you've heard of ratio approach to learning, but she says that the environment is a third teacher. So in the environment, there are things that help the child to learn, even when the teacher is not, interacting with the child directly. The environment itself, what you put there, it is always speaking, and the child interacts with it, and they help them to learn. They help the teacher alongside to teach the child.
That is very good, and I'm glad that you come on the podcast to share with us all this information and what you're doing to help the kids. I'm sure, like, it's like you are a hero, like a how do they call it, backstage or behind the scenes hero that people don't know, because the input you're putting in this is huge. People might not see it, people might not see the outcomes of it right now, but in the future, in 10 years, like, I'll be here and be like, hey, the teacher who helped me 10 years ago, like, it's a reason why I can sit here and talk, and like teachers who caned me to speak English in high school, the reason I can sit down here and speak English without any issues, like
Yeah.
things we don't look at, but like the reading and what you're doing, the materials. And yeah, if you ever run anything in the future to just raise support or help, because I know it takes a lot, it's not an easy thing to do like a one person. Yeah, just let me know, and then we can see how we can look for people to support. I've personally been in touch with the kids back in Uganda to help them go back to school. I've ran a few campaigns on my social media, on my podcast, to raise funds to help kids go back to school, especially from the pandemic where the parents were poor and
Yeah.
there's nothing. So God has helped use me to find people to support these kids to go back to school. There's a few kids
Okay.
that have gone back to school and personally using that. So if there's anything to support and help a good cause, which I think you're doing is a very good thing, I would love to support. So
Oh, thank
again,
you. Thank you.
again, I want to appreciate you for being on the podcast, and I want to ask you a question. What is a life lesson you've learned in life till today? Like,
Um, I think you keep moving. You keep moving no matter the challenges, no matter the obstacles, you keep moving. And one thing I keep telling myself, like there are times when you reach and it's like everything is closed up. You're like alone with nothing. But I remember the story of Moses in the Bible. He had a stick. So every time I would be really, really stuck, I'm like, God, where is my stick? Which stick do I have? I need to see that stick. I need to see that stick. So I always look around me and I'm like, what do I have right now? What do I have? Like when I stopped teaching, I really wanted to do a school. I've always wanted to do a school, by the way. From the time when I was really young, like in 2008, I wanted to do a school. I've always wanted to do a school. So in 2017, when I stopped teaching and the many things that were happening and everything, I'm like, I really need to set up a school where I think I dictate what children learn, and they get the most out of their time at school. So I look for money, I talk to people, I do everything, and everything was like, there was a roadblock everywhere. But I was like, now what is my stick? And I remembered my stick is the knowledge that I've acquired over time that could bless other people. So I sat down and started putting that down into books. So I do workbooks, I do different materials to help, you know, uh, equip the classroom to be able to teach a child. And also, so many teachers are not aware of these things. But so when I use that, I help them to, get to know that these things exist. You can't use what you don't know, and you can't even dream about what you don't know, what you've never
that's true.
seen. Yeah, so I bring things down there. So that was my stick. I had that, and I still have it. And my other skill is doing research. I love to read and break down information. So I'm like, okay, when I look around me and there's nothing, I'm like, what do I have? I always have something. I tell people as a Christian that God can never put you there. He's a loving God. He can't put you there with nothing. And and he turns his back and goes. So you can think you have nothing, but it's because you're turning in a different direction. You need to turn in the direction where your stick is and you'll find it.
That is good. Yeah, that's true. I like the way you ended it, reminding them to turn where their stick is. What gets you excited about life?
It's new possibilities.
Okay.
There's a way I'm like, there is a brand new day means like these new possibilities. And I feel like the best is yet to come. I just have to keep moving and keep moving. There's a lot that is in store for me. That's what I believe. I believe that there's so much that I have to do. I'm in education for a purpose. Yes, I landed there somehow by mistake, but it wasn't,
Yeah.
because I've found myself to be like really useful in that place. And also I enjoy my work so much. So there's so many possibilities. There's so many possibilities. Yeah.
So we have about 2 minutes and we're concluding. But my final question is, who would you like to see on my podcast as a guest? And you're gonna have to recommend that person to come on the podcast. So you help me to find the person and we contact them to come and share their story on the podcast.
Okay. Do I have to tell the person now or I have to think about it?
If you don't have anybody right now, you'll think about it. And since we're in context, you can let me know when you find somebody.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let me think about it and I'll tell you. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Gertrude. Thank you very much for your time. And I was able to talk to you about education, and I've learned something, and I'm sure my listeners are gonna learn a lot from you.
No, thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and for obeying God or your spirit to start this. It's a good platform. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, and see you.
See ya.
Hey there, my name is Bani Kibuka, the host of the Ugandan Boy Talk Show. Thanks for listening and watching my podcast. Tune in every Saturday at 11 a.m. for a new episode on the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, share, and we appreciate it. If you can, leave a feedback on our podcast, please. Thank you very much.